That is based upon projects which are in the pipeline, either approved or in some form of the approval process with the planning board, and included in that is 100 units of retirement housing on Park Street. From the year 2000 to total build-out, whenever that might be, there's a possibility of an additional 800 houses. At that time, we would be over 1,400 new houses from the year 1988 to present. And in that estimate includes Steve Cass's proposal for 110 adult retirement community units, condominiums. So, what has the town done about all this in regard to protecting the town's open space? Again, another sobering fact. In the total town square acreage is 13,836 acres. In 1987, 10 years ago, we had 5,727 acres in open space. And about 50% of that was undevelopable because it was contained in areas of critical concern such as Cedar Swamp. In 1995, only 8 years later, 2 years ago, we were down to 1,481 acres of open space, or about 10% of the entire area of the town remains in open space. Historically, the town has taken some steps to protect its natural resources. Between 1969 and 1971, the town acquired 144 acres of conservation land around the reservoir to help with the state with money of the state's self-help program to protect, obviously, the reservoir and our water supply. To safeguard the future of popular recreation, in 1974, the town meeting voted to purchase 109 acres for the Westborough Country Club. In the next 6 years, the town meeting voted to purchase land for soccer and ball fields in the eastern, central, and southern ends of town. In 1994, William and Mary Libby gave 110 acres of farmland to the town as a potential elementary school site, and most recently in 1995, at a town meeting vote, we purchased 5.5 acres at the intersection of Upton and Hopkinton Road to develop soccer fields. Recently, however, you may say, well, we've purchased some land, but that doesn't really deal with our open space question. In 1986, the town changed its zoning for single-family house lots. From 25,000 square feet, they doubled it to 50,000 square feet. But that still didn't do enough, so in 1991, the planning board proposed a zoning change to create open space communities. At this point, I'll jump off the boring numbers and give you something to look at. Open space communities are a subdivision bylaw that's aimed at protecting the quality of life and the natural topography of a site that's under consideration for housing development. What you see here is a conventional plan. You don't see any green area because there's no common space. A conventional plan assumes that all the land will be maxed out for house lots. In other words, there is no common open space. The land is fully used for single-family homes. What the planning board does is they require a developer to come in and prove how many house lots he could build in a conventional subdivision. They then apply the 15,000 square foot zoning of an open space community, and it produces green space. This is what an actual open space community looks like that was recently approved up on Connector Road, between Connector and Hundreds Road. It's called Prentice Forest. This is 75% open space and over 50 acres of public land. In 1995, my upside-down plans, the planning board, in cooperation with the Open Space Committee and the Recreation Department, produced our Open Space Master Plan. For those of you that can't see this, what we have here is a collection of properties which are either currently protected by the open space provisions of either subdivisions or agricultural protection bylaws that are granted by the state or the federal government, as well as the light green spaces, which are potential open space sites which are not yet developed. And the darker green are those which are already protected. There are over 100 sites here in town that are still available for open space. Each one of these is numbered, and if you're interested in any one of these, you're welcome to come up and talk to me later about that. By putting together those individual spaces, those individual parcels, we came up with open space corridors. What this is an attempt to connect the dots. Where's the open space parcels along within the town, and how would you move from one to the other if you wanted to hike laterally, north to south, east to west across town? We came up with several corridors. You can see one to the north. We have one that runs north to south. And we have one very large one down in the heavily populated southwest portion of the town. We also have one which is protected in perpetuity in Cedar Swamp out here by the rail line. What we did from that then was to identify potential hiking trails and areas of interest, which we call an action plan. And this is obviously what the land trusts want to work off at some point. We've identified again the individual parcels and shown their ability to link to other parcels, as well as regionally to link to other towns. Because we do have a lot of these parcels on the fringe of town that could serve to help with cooperation with some of our neighboring towns, which would give us a competitive advantage if we were looking for money from the state or the federal government. They do favor proposals where towns cooperate to present open space corridors. Some of the other things that the Planning Board, the Open Space Committee, and the Recreation Department have done within the last year was to rework the subdivision rules and regulations. We used to have a bylaw that was written as a result of the state's subdivision control law, which would allow the town or the Planning Board to set aside 5% of a subdivision for a period not to exceed 3 years for recreational use. At the end of 3 years, the town could either buy the property or allow the developer to develop it. What the Planning Board has done is we have now, through our subdivision process and amending it last year, have taken that one step further. Within those guidelines, we now require the developer to work with the Open Space Committee and to work with the Recreation Department at actually identifying where that 5% would be within a conventional subdivision. Now, in an open space community, it's different, but it functions basically the same in that the town or the Planning Board would have the right to designate the actual land within the subdivision that would be used as open space. If you've been to town meeting, you've seen town land presented for town meeting approval to be accepted to the town, many parcels of which are in subdivisions. And sometimes that land is not suitable for open space or recreational use. It's basically worthless land. Wetlands, steep slopes, ledge, swampland, things that no one would use for even passive recreation, bird watching, or anything like that. This new bylaw change would effectively do away with that. We would then have the right to choose which land up front during the approval process would remain as open space. But short of those few regulational changes, there are very little controls that are left to any locality in the state to control open space. The Supreme Court has said that if the town has the ability to provide public services, it will provide those services. And many times I hear people ask about moratoriums on development. You can propose a moratorium if you can show that you have stress on your infrastructure, your water and sewer. There's not that problem here in Westborough. We do have capacity to expand our water and sewer facilities, and we have done so recently. Whenever a sewer trunk line crosses in front of a piece of vacant land, it is now developable. If we don't have in place the mechanisms to acquire vacant property for open space or for future development intended by the town, that land will be developed. Property owners have the right to develop their land. That's federally protected, and we need to understand that. Many times when a project comes in front of the Planning Board, one of the most difficult things that my board has to deal with is dealing with public outcry. And the board is sensitive to that, but it's impossible to say no to a project. All you can do is limit it. Unless it poses a nuisance or a threat to public safety or public health, you can't deny a project. You can control its design, you can manipulate how it's developed, but you can't stop it. The best way to stop development is to purchase the land. That's it.
You want to take your pointer?
I don't want to forget my
Don't
point.
forget your pointer.
You're not going to leave it for the next speaker.
I wouldn't do that.
There are more pointers on the table back there. Anybody that needs one. There are also some paperweights, look like cookies. The next on our agenda will be Ellen Lutz, who's the chair of the Open Space Preservation Committee. I think that Jim just explained what a very factual presentation, and you'll be hearing more about what we believe the land trust solution to some of these problems are. But I'm going to ask Ellen now to speak about how the Open Space Preservation Committee has been addressing the problems as a public, as an arm of the town government. Ellen?
Well, if you'll forgive a couple of personal remarks, you might have noticed on the ballots that whenever someone had lived in town for a long time, we put down a lifelong resident or had been here for 5 generations or what have you. But I'm a newcomer, and I've only been in town a little less than 3 years ago. 3 years, and when I moved here, I was not only a stranger to the town, but I really had no ties in New England, and it kind of was obvious to me from day one that if I was going to make a life for my family and myself in this community, that the only way possible was to get involved. And so I confess that I was attracted to the Open Space Preservation Committee, not because of a lifelong interest in environmental protection, although I do enjoy the great outdoors, but after 9 years in Los Angeles, I thought Westborough was heaven. I mean, it just was so green and quiet and peaceful, and it seemed like so much open space. But really, I was attracted to the Open Space Committee because there was an opening, and I wanted to be involved in some way in the civic affairs of the community. It really wasn't until I was on the committee that I realized that while I was celebrating my reprieve from congestion, people here were, if I may use the word, in mourning over what had been lost in our community. And I won't repeat the description that Jim just gave you of the dramatic changes that have occurred in Westborough. It's, I think, you know, we tried to sum it up when we wrote the Open Space and Recreation Plan with those words. In the past 10 years, half of Westborough's usable open space has been developed, and it's, you know, we know where it's going. Not only has this growth taken a toll on the town's natural resources and wildlife habitats, but the population explosion that's accompanying it is straining the town's capacity to meet the educational, public safety, infrastructural, and passive and active recreational needs of our residents. So this urgency, the need to buy land and to take steps is more than about open space. It's really about a quality of life in a community, and it's a very vibrant community, and one as I say, as a newcomer, I can't tell you how much I treasure it and want to ensure that quality of life remains high. When I joined, I always tell this story. When I joined the Open Space Committee, Steve Hall, who was then the chair, said to me, you know, this committee's chief purpose is to serve as the conscience of the community, and I love that line. I think we've become quite a needling conscience. I'd like to share with you some of the things that we have done in that capacity. Well, you've heard about the Open Space and Recreation Plan. Obviously, the final product was important because that made us eligible for a variety of state granting opportunities that would assist us in acquiring open space. But in many respects, it was this learning process that you've seen here that I think was the real important outcome of the development of the Open Space Plan, because it was through that process that we were able to begin to develop a vision for what we could do to protect open space in Westborough. As Jim pointed out, it was a collaborative effort. In fact, it was more than the Planning Board, the Open Space Preservation Committee, and the Recreation Department. The Board of Selectmen was involved, the Conservation Committee was involved, many landowners in town were involved, and of course many citizens came out to our many public meetings as we went through that process. Let me also say that it absolutely couldn't have happened without Jim Robbins. who has just been the Rock of Gibraltar all the way through this process. I'm going to say it and embarrass him, but my respect for him is absolutely immense, and he's made this whole effort one that I think, makes it possible for us to realize. We did, as you can see, identify all the remaining parcels of open space. We were able to build these, identify these corridor links and create what I hope is going to be a vision that will be shared by the Open Space Preservation Committee and the town and the Land Trust. One of the main goals we felt was a corridor that links the two reservoirs with a combination of walking trails and parkland, so that you could essentially walk around some or all of Mill Pond and then come down through the country club and through a series of trails and possibly some land acquisition, walk right on down through to Sandra Pond and possibly beyond, possibly all the way to Hopkinton. But that was our central. You can see how that would work here right on the map in terms of these green corridors. That land is still open, and we've been working very hard to see what we could do to acquire it or get conservation or trail easement so that we could build in that direction. Then the other thing that we wanted to do, we have a lovely downtown that has nice sidewalks, but beginning at the Rotary, we wanted to begin to develop a trail system that goes along the perimeter of Cedar Swamp and connects all the way out, so you could basically walk from the Rotary to the Walk-Up Robinson Reservation, which would be a wonderful link. And basically then much of our town is tied together, and if we really work hard, we should be able to then, through some passage across public space, be able to link up with the Sawwind Reservation in the north and go across the trolley line maybe and